Good day. This informational video is all about archives and special collections, how we evaluate, process, and preserve unique materials that are so important to scholarship. What are special collections? Purdue University defines a special collection as a collection of or group of items, such as rare books or documents, that are either irreplaceable or unusually rare and valuable. For this reason, special collections are also stored separately from the regular library collections in a secure location with environmental controls to preserve the items for posterity. Special collections also include rare items that are focused on a single topic, such as the items that we hold here at UVI in our Caribbean room. They are all items related to the Caribbean, and this collection of single topic and single sort of region items makes a very sort of specialized repository. This distinguishes our institution from other libraries. Now, what's an archive? Is an archive and a special collection the same thing? It's really not. An archive can live within a special collection or it can stand on its own. Archives are more specifically materials created or received by a person, family, or organization, either public or private, in the conduct of their affairs, and preserved because of the enduring value contained in the information that they contain or as evidence of the functions and responsibilities of their creator, especially those materials maintained using the principles of provenance, original order, and collective control. So that was a mouthful. What that means is archives are evidence and things created by particular people or organizations that scholars might find interesting. For example, all of the personal correspondence between perhaps two authors or two politicians or two famous married people. Any collection that has personal touches from people who, scholars may find historically interesting or may contain important information for scholarship would be considered something that would live in an archive. Again, archives can be included within a special collection or they can be stored separately. For example, here at UVI, our archives mostly pertain to UVI. Other archives may mostly pertain to, anybody. Imagine that you have letters between Barack and Michelle Obama. Those letters would maybe end up in an archival repository, perhaps at one or both of their universities, and scholars would study them. With regard to provenance and order, original order, what that means is that the creator of the item has put these papers in a certain order. And so an archivist does not disturb that order. Everything is kept the way that the original creator had it organized. Whether that makes sense to you or I or to the archivist or not, it's important that things are preserved in their original sort of state. So now let's talk about the difference between archives, special collection materials, and then our regular library materials. So the differences are pretty obvious. Materials from the library are secondary sources. That includes published printed materials, books and periodicals, which may also be available digitally. So if you think about all the various subscriptions to journals and different ways that we can access information online, also ebooks. These items can be borrowed. They can be browsed in person in normal times. If you find something in our catalog nowadays that you would like to come and pick up, you just let us know and we'll pull it from the shelf for you so that you can come and pick it up in person. The other thing is that our library materials don't really require a special preservation environment, just like regular sort of temperature controls are sufficient. Whereas a special collection holds primary and secondary sources. So those primary sources are the items that are created during the particular time that you may be studying or by directly the actual people that you may be studying. These items can only be viewed in the library by appointment. Our collection is closed. So if you do see something online that you're interested in looking at in person, you can make an appointment and we will get it ready for you and you can come in and take a look at it. Browsing can only be done online if the items are digitized. A lot of our materials are not digitized. However, in larger repositories, archives, libraries, and museums, they have massive digitization projects, which you'll see a little bit of in a few moments. So obviously these things are unique and rare. We want to keep them safe. And oftentimes they pertain to a particular region or topic. Our Caribbean room is, again, a perfect example of that. And they do require a preservation environment. In our case, moisture control, controlling the sunlight, and temperature control. So we have a variety of unique and interesting historical materials from all over the Caribbean. Our collection is a rare and unique collection of works that represent a diverse people, culture, and heritage throughout the islands. The goal of our collection is to highlight the social, economic, political, cultural, and topical issues of our region. So that means that it includes all kinds of materials related to civilization, history, literature of the Caribbean region. English, French, Hispanic, and Dutch-speaking Caribbean islands are all represented. And we also have literature from local Virgin Islanders. So I've included a link here. This is a link to a library guide created by Nicole Hatfield, who's our library manager. She took the Caribbean history class and created this amazing resource for people. So these are all different Caribbean resources. You see video resources, you see there's the official textbook for the history of the Caribbean. There's some internet resources, profiles of outstanding Virgin Islanders. This is actually something that we do have digitized. So you can take a look at that online, various videos. She's included so much great information. This is from Project Introspection, a brief historical notes on the schools of the Virgin Islands. This is really pretty cool, very uniquely local items. And then our VI library resources, there are some more really great books here represented. So just to give you a sense of a place where you can get very specific Virgin Islands history, library resources, and then of course, everything that we have in the regular Caribbean collection. So I will link to that. Here is our interface. You can get to this from the library website. And here are our individual collections. So historical photographs, again, Project Introspection, Olasi Davis newspapers contributing to the Daily News and the St. Croix Avis. It's a wonderful number of very great op-ed articles. Funeral booklets and memorial programs. This gives you such interesting information about local Virgin Islanders. And then of course we have, I took some pictures in the Caribbean room, and of course I had to include some really cool old stuff on pirates and other various things. You notice in this cabinet, we have all kinds of brochures and pamphlets and just, ephemera that gives a sense of what was going on at the time when those things were produced. So we have some really wonderful pieces of history here and some really great current items as well. So how do we make these items accessible to researchers? In the old days, and actually still today, as I said before, archivists are concerned with provenance. Provenance is the origin, custody, or ownership of the items. And then, of course, the arrangement. Now, I already talked about original order, which is the order determined by the creator. We want to always keep things arranged exactly as they were, unless it's just kind of a bunch of stuff thrown in a box. In that case, an order is determined by the archivist or the special collections librarian. When we get a giant box of stuff, what we do is we create a survey and appraisal form. So here is a survey and appraisal form that I created during library school for a bequest of materials from a person who left their archiving. There are archival items, the Roger Levinson archives, to the Bancroft Library at the University of California. So this person gave us a lot of cartons of items. And so this form basically is a way for archivists and special collections librarians to create like an inventory of whatever comes in. So we have gaps in the collection, weeding, how many boxes originally came in. Originally there were 22 and now there's 8. So 10 boxes of books were donated to another department. So when you think about a huge bequest from a person who might be of local interest, they may give a library, uh, a bunch of different cartons of various things, and they'll be filled with all kinds of ephemera. Sometimes it's just old envelopes or grocery lists. And then also within there is interesting, fascinating pieces of history. So you're kind of like a history detective when you get to look through all these interesting sort of boxes of stuff. The collection was willed to the Bancroft by Mr. Levinson, the collection's creator. No third party was involved. So in that case, the archivist would probably try to keep Mr. Levinson's items exactly as they had been left. Sometimes things are really valuable, so we do an appraisal. In this case, that wasn't necessary. And then the acquisition policy of the library. So that particular library or that particular archive emphasizes materials in the area of Western Americana. So this university is in California, Northern California. So it really depends where the person was from and what they did in that area, which makes their sort of archival items either valuable or not. And then some of the stuff was obviously kind of taken to different areas of the university. Which materials might the Bancroft elect to deaccession? That's a fancy word for saying getting rid of stuff. So blank letter stock, receipts, and bills. So like I said earlier, grocery lists, we probably don't want to keep that. But somebody's job is to go through and make sure that you're not getting rid of anything important. So finding aids will be created later. Sometimes items come with finding aids. This just gives you a sense. So his proposed arrangement of the collection, women in printing, research and drafts, printed material from teaching. So this is all of his stuff. And then look at the timeline for processing. 9.6 linear feet at processing rate C, so 20 hours per linear foot. They're looking at 192 total hours to process this fellow's archival bequest. So that kind of just gives you a sense of how much work is involved in processing these items. So then we label and store. And so if you look at this picture up in the right-hand corner, you'll see that basically things are put in brown paper and tagged. And sometimes that's all you can do. You have to work with what you've got, whatever your facility has. And we want to make sure that we preserve things as best as we possibly can. The most effective ways of doing that are just making sure that everything is kept, again, temperature controlled and as neat as possible. This archive down here in the left corner, it's definitely an example of a more modernized approach, labeled and stored, and then we have finding aids. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a way for people to find the items. So I found this finding aid, which technically is digital, but it gives you a sense of what a finding aid would look like. Now, if you look here, it says this series contains records, some of which may not be available online. So this really looks like exactly what it is. It's a form that's been digitized, but it really just gives bare bones information about these medical records from the Tuskegee experiments happening from 1933 all the way to 1972. This is some very interesting, sad, sort of thought-provoking material, but when you look at this form, it doesn't really give us that sense of how important it is. Now it gives our scope and content. The series contains patient medical records from the Tuskegee syphilis study. The typical patient file includes a personal history, medical examination, and subsequent examinations, electrocardiography charts, and laboratory results. A file may also include autopsy results, letters attempting to locate the patient or surviving family members, and notice of payment to the patient or next of kin. That gives us a clue that something really kind of scary was going on here. So 19 linear feet, that's how much space it took up. And in this situation, these records aren't necessarily all digitized, although perhaps they're working on making sure that they are. So you might have to travel all the way to Morrow, Georgia in order to see these actual pieces of paper, these actual files. So it gives you a sense of what archivists, or rather what historians, had to do in the past in order to do their research. You would have to just literally put yourself in the car or in a plane and go. So another thing that, as I said, we're trying to do, we as a profession are trying to digitize things. That way, scholars from all over the world can look at these wonderful pieces of information without having to travel. So this is the Citizen Archivist Missions, and this is a really cool project where you can contribute. So we ask, or they ask, rather, that people take part by tagging images, by including images that they find interesting. So taking a look here. These are sort of ways of qualifying your search. And I like to look at the earliest possible items that they have. So 1860 to 1869. Now I'm going to show you a digitized version of a pension file for Private Pompey Factor, Detachment of Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, U.S. Army. Okay, so when you look at this, someone took the time, and remember when I talked earlier about the box of stuff. So here's one of those envelopes. And here it starts to get a little bit more interesting. Here are his various reports. He's a pensioner. He died March 16th, 1928. And it looks like they tried to deny him his pension when he was alive. As I was reading earlier into this, it's quite interesting. He claims to have been cited for bravery for saving the life of a commander. And he went back and forth with the Army trying to obtain this pension, which I believe eventually he did get. And you see all the original handwriting. This is the part that's really interesting. The old gentleman is an illiterate and has no recollection of dates or any information that would assist in the persecution of his claim, and has to depend on his friends who served in the scouts with him to assist him with this information. Anyway, it goes on, but it gives you a sense that within these boxes of stuff, it just looks like a bunch of pieces of paper, and you start reading, you really get an amazing, vivid picture of what you can find out from these kinds of digitized archives. Okay, so digital items. Sometimes things come to us already digitized. And in that case, we want to determine the item's original file type and decide which format would be best for storage, future access, and sustainability. We identify records held on removable storage media, such as memory sticks or floppy disks, with a view to transferring them to more secure storage environments, such as a server. Now, we always make copies, right? You make at least one additional copy, usually more like 3 copies of each file, and only make changes to the copies. These changes may include migrating any file formats in danger of becoming obsolete or converting to a lossless file format. So JPEG is a perfect example. People use JPEGs for photos. However, every time you share or you make copies of your JPEG, what happens is that it starts to degrade. And pretty soon you don't have as wonderful of a photograph as you had when you first sort of took it, digitized it. So we want to always use the best technology to preserve these items. So here are some changes that you might make in order to expand access. So I found this also at the National Archives. This is a really great picture of Marcus Garvey. And what I wanted to point out were these tags. Oh, and then here's his draft registration card for World War I. Now, what was also happening at that time, which is very pertinent to what we're talking about today, the 1918 flu pandemic. Now, you can use these tags. They're just like the tags that you use on Instagram or any other social media in order to kind of aggregate images or ideas or pictures of people or pictures of stuff. Here's people in their masks, right? It says, wear a mask and save your life, the 1918 flu pandemic. And from here, this tag is for the 19th Amendment. And what happens when we follow that? You know, when we think about things like YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, we call it going down a rabbit hole, but this is like a really awesomely exciting, positive rabbit hole because you're learning so much every time you click. So here's suffragist Carrie Chapman Catt. And if you're a women's history person, you probably know who she is. Anyway, it goes on and on and on, and you could spend hours and hours and hours, which is the wonderful thing about how we are able to sort records nowadays. We use something called the resource description and access rules to catalog items. The system was designed to be flexible and extensible, which means you can keep adding and adding and adding. It's so different from like an actual, paper file. And it's really made for the digital world because it allows us to cluster records and tag to show relationships between items, which we just saw, Marcus Garvey to the flu pandemic, to Carrie Chapman Catt. So tagging used to be this kind of really unique out there thing. And now we're so used to it that it's become the way that we connect information. And now, of course, information professionals are using it too. We then create a digital preservation strategy, which just basically means how are we organizing this? Maybe you're going to do a file naming system using a directory format or a folder format. You develop a system of governance by creating a digital preservation strategy. So a plan, essentially. And then finally, I just wanted to show this kind of new, amazing, modern finding aid. So I showed you the Tuskegee finding aid, which gave you a very clear idea of how it's just sort of this form, this piece of paper with the information on it. Now this, on the other hand, makes the actual items into the finding aid. You can get a lot of information just by looking at these pictures. This is also from the National Archive. 18,000 photographs from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Okay, so let's click on this one. Photograph of an official, probably the US Reclamation Service, with unidentified Indians. I probably would have said indigenous folks. Now, explore in more detail. So, topics, clothing and groups, right? Here is the National Archives catalog identifier. There are 69 other digitized records in the archival series Indian Life on the Western Reservation. Now, if we click on this catalog identifier, it's going to take us to the catalog and give us some more information about, where did this picture come from? Is it the access restricted or unrestricted? We always have to think about copyright. Is this a reproduction? Where does this live? It looks like it lives in College Park, Maryland. But, we don't even have to go to Maryland because we can look at these pictures from the comfort of our homes, our laptops, which is what makes modern informational retrieval and modern information science so exciting. So that concludes this video. If you have more questions about archives and special collections, please chat us, email us, or give us a call here in the library, and we would be more than happy to give you more information. Thank you so much for your time.